I am Adam Kennedy. I am the director of the Rescue and Rehab Department, Sea Turtle Hospital, Quincy, Massachusetts, New England Aquarium.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Rossifari podcast. So this episode is going to start a series of 3 different interviews from New England Aquarium. And each one of them is going to feature a different facet of stuff that goes on through New England Aquarium. And I specifically say through New England Aquarium because only one of the interviews actually took place at the aquarium. The other ones took place in Quincy, Massachusetts. It's spelled Quincy, but you can't call it that. You got to call it Quincy. And the first one here today is coming to you from the Sea Turtle Hospital. And if you know me, if you've listened at all, you know that my OG animal love was sea turtles. If it wasn't for seeing sea turtles when I was young, I don't think Rossifari would exist. I don't think I would even know what a red panda or any of my other little favorite animals are if it wasn't for sea turtles. So getting to see a bunch of turtles that were going to hopefully be healed up and released back into the wild, thanks to New England Aquarium, was a very, very special thing for me. And you know, this is one of those topics that I love to bring up when people talk about zoos and aquariums and try and show them in a negative light. One of the things that often comes up is people will accuse them of taking advantage of the animals in their care for profit, right? Because, you know, obviously you get into the zoo field to make a lot of money, right? Lol. But, you know, places like this hospital completely dispel that myth because this is not open to the public. This is not something that most people know about. It's just a hospital that takes care of rescued sea turtles and releases them into the wild. It's a building with the cost of a building. It is all kinds of filtration systems and tanks and all kinds of things that they need to take care of these turtles. It is food and staff and medicine and just all these really expensive things that aren't there for public consumption. It has nothing to do with getting people in the doors of the aquarium. These are all costs simply because the aquarium and the people there want to help make the world better. If there was only concern about making money, this hospital wouldn't exist, and all of that money would go into the pockets of the people running the aquarium. But that's not the case, and I am so excited to share that story with all of you now. Now, I will tell you, my interview with Adam was done in the hospital, and Adam's a busy guy. I had to edit around all kinds of cool stuff happening. I got to see some really amazing things, especially pertaining to the veterinary care of the animals in question. But yeah, so you're going to hear the interviews. There's a working hospital in the background. I edited the audio as best I can, but you're going to hear some stuff because we were in the place doing the thing. But what an amazing place it is. I'm just so stoked to share this interview with you. And then after that, I will share with you a little bit about a very special experience I got to have where I actually got to go to a sea turtle release. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little later. But first, here's my interview with Adam Kennedy of the Sea Turtle Hospital at New England Aquarium.
This is our clinic. I like to kind of start at the beginning because as the song goes, it's a wonderful place to start.
Indeed.
So, Sea Turtle Hospital, Quincy, Massachusetts, New England Aquarium. Welcome.
And who are you, by the way?
I am Adam Kennedy. I am the director of the Rescue and Rehab Department.
Nice. So
we mainly work with cold-stunned sea turtles, 3 species, chem-friendly, loggerhead, and green sea turtles. Chem-friendlies are critically endangered. The other two are threatened. We occasionally, as you look up, it's a big leatherback.
My dream,
down at us.
the number one dream in my life is to see a leatherback.
Oh, nice.
I never have. I've never had the chance yet, but I know it'll happen eventually.
Amazing animal.
Yeah.
So it's the summer. So in the summer, typically, if we're getting called to an animal out in the field, it is leatherbacks.
Wow.
We have a project going on with the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life, which is our kind of research division. So not going to be seeing them in here.
That would be challenging. These aren't really big enough, I would assume.
But we have actually had several leatherbacks come through.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we've actually been able to release one after 3 days.
That's amazing.
With us. So it can happen.
Wow.
You never know. But they are very hard to do things with because they just are so pelagic. They don't get the concept of walls. So,
right.
When we talk about 24/7, it is 24/7 that we are here if there is an animal like that in here. But that's a very small portion of things that we've done. The majority is working with our turtle friends that are here currently. So, we see the most of the Kemp's Ridleys come through the program, followed by Loggerheads and then green sea turtles, just numbers-wise. Mm-hmm. We moved into this offsite facility in 2010, which was great because unbeknownst to us, our average of 40 to 50 turtles back in 2010 have now ballooned up to over 400 animals on average every year.
Okay, why? Yeah. Do we know why? Do we think why?
So the biggest number there is really for the Kemp's Ridleys.
Okay.
The Loggerheads and the greens have kind of steadily continued to increase in their numbers for strandings, but year over year it would be statistically normal.
Okay.
The tenfold number of the Kemp's Ridleys most likely stems from the Gulf of Maine warming. We saw the numbers really kick up in the early teens, 2012, 13, 14. If you can see this graph, it doesn't go any further than 2014, but you can kind of see here in the 2000s, that nice average of about 40 turtles. We move in here, we almost break our record back that was set in 99. And then 2012, we had broke our record. And then 2014, we shattered it.
Yeah,
over,
that's amazing.
690 live animals coming into the facility. And the majority of which is the Kemp's Ridley. And so likely it was around this time, 2014, 15 is when the Gulf of Maine Research put out their report showing that the Gulf of Maine was one of, if not the fastest warming body of waters in all of the oceans.
Wow.
And it held that title up until I think maybe last year when the Arctic took over, unfortunately. But so likely what is happening here, so if you shift and kind of look at this fun map, so you've got these turtles, and you'll see they're all juveniles, and as you've seen them, they're small.
Yeah.
Most of these turtles anywhere between 1 and 4 kilograms, so 3 and 8, 9 pounds, for those of you, 2 pounds. So the Kemp's Ridleys really only have 2 nesting sites, both of which are in the Gulf of Mexico. So you have Rancho Nuevo, Mexico, which is the home range for their beaches that the turtles will head back to and nest and where the hatchlings come from. In the 70s, a binational agreement happened, and so they started moving some nests out of Mexico and went up to South Padre in Texas. And so they now have a secondary nesting site there, but again, all in the Gulf of Mexico. So you have the hatchlings get into the Gulf of Mexico, they travel in, they come out the Gulf Stream, and then they kind of ride that Gulf Stream up. At some point, these animals are near shore. They inhabit the coastal regions. So something clicks, tells them, all right, time to go from the Gulf Stream back inland. You get past Massachusetts and Cape Cod, and that's cold water right there for the majority of the year. So as they come in from the Gulf Stream, typically they'd hit cold water, which would have them head south. But in the summer, the turtles, with the warming of the Gulf of Maine, that wall kind of isn't there to keep them out. So historically, it's been a small amount of time. You get some turtles get in, we see that number that we've historically have seen for decades. But now without that, you're seeing a lot more animals funnel in. One would hope that that was because of nesting numbers being much greater, increasing that the hatchlings from one number to 10 times that, but that's really not what they're seeing down at the nesting beaches.
That's unfortunate.
Again, for the Kemp's Ridleys. Loggerheads and greens, their numbers are increasing, which is awesome.
I feel like I've had so much good sea turtle news lately, like on my podcast. I'm always like, this is awesome. This is nice. But it is a good reminder that is not true for all of them.
Right.
It is always greens and loggerheads,
Yes. And so that allows the turtles to kind of funnel in more numbers, and Cape Cod Bay have a longer time frame to do that, so they're able to get in. In the summer, Cape Cod Bay is an awesome spot for these turtles. Great temperature, a lot of good forage, both for your more carnivorous turtles like the loggerheads and the Kemps. The greens, they're kind of omnivorous at this stage. As they grow to adulthood, they'll switch over to the turtle eelgrass, and there is that out there in Cape Cod Bay. So great spot for those turtles. Then the fall comes, weather gets cold. They want to head south because they want to get away from that cold weather. Shape of Massachusetts kind of locks them in there. And for a turtle that's using magnetic poles to navigate, they don't want to swim north to go south. And so
that makes a lot of sense.
So with Massachusetts flexing its muscle there, it really, they continue to want to head south. And we've had a couple turtles that have come back that were satellite tags, and we've seen them kind of look like they're trying to figure out how do I get south by going east and west. And now they need to go northeast to loop around. So a lot of questions about these turtles when they get in Cape Cod Bay. Do any of the turtles get out of here? Do a lot of them, and these are just some remnants that are left. But again, they can't figure out how to get out. It gets colder. They start to float at the surface, trying to maintain that body temperature, hoping that, maybe expecting that this cold snap will blow over like it does down south. But that's not happening, as those of us that live up here know. They got a bunch of months ahead of them that it's going to be very cold. And so towards the end of October, early November, start to see turtles start to strand. And that's when the Wellfleet Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, folks at Mass Audubon down there, they go out and find the turtles that strand. And it all really is very dependent on the wind direction and how strong those winds are blowing and how many days in a row. And so they'll go find turtles, and any of those turtles that are alive, the majority have come up here. We're the primary triage facility in Massachusetts. There's a secondary facility as well, but the majority do come to us. And then we start that process of the warming up. First day, they go to 55 degrees. Most of these turtles are typically in the 40s Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And then we go about 10 degrees per day until we get into the mid-70s. And we get them swimming. These turtles, especially the Kemps and the greens, are not doing so great. They haven't eaten in weeks or months. They're very malnourished. They're very skinny, dehydrated. They also will sometimes come in with some fractures. Most of them have pneumonia of varying degrees. And so they're all medically treated. They all get x-rays on that first day. The really severe cases, because we're now dealing with tens or hundreds of animals in the facility, get blood drawn so we can kind of see where they're at. Every animal gets treated, but the ones that are more severe kind of get more of that specialized care.
Right.
Early on, everyone's getting everything. When those turtles come in, those first couple of weeks, we're not, when we're still under kind of a normal intake flow, they get soup to nuts, all the stuff that we have historically done. But now when we get into those phases where we now have, 100, close to 200 animals in the facility, there's not enough time in the day to do that specialized care. But we've been doing this for so long that we really have been able to hone what we need to do to get those turtles to a point where they're then, a lot of the turtles are transferred to other facilities around the country. Come December, January, if there's a Kemp's Ridley in rehab in a facility out in the U.S., probably came from Cape Cod Bay.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Because there's just not enough rehab space out there. And I would love to keep all of our turtles that come in, but we don't have the space here either.
Right.
And the organizations that are out there do awesome jobs. So happy to send them along. But the turtles that we kind of deem most critical that aren't going to be able to make a flight, or a drive, we'll keep them here. So today, if you look around, we have a turtle that's in the 100. So that was I think he's 143, if I remember correctly. So that was the 143rd turtle for last year. So, but we also have turtles in the 700s. So that turtle came in November. He just cleared to be released. So we're going to get that turtle out. But that turtle had a lot of issues, as you can tell from the number. He never got on a plane out of here.
Right.
Because of the volume of animals that are coming through, we want to move animals out when we can, so that way they can have, really get to that one-on-one care earlier. Plus, we typically will send south first, where the Atlantic is still warm enough that maybe as those earlier turtles are not as poor as those later animals, and so they might be able to be released in a month or 6 weeks. And then if they're in Florida or Georgia or in the Gulf of Mexico states, they might be able to be released in December, whereas up here, that's not happening.
Right.
So
makes sense.
Yeah.
I think this picture is so amazing. I'm actually going to take a picture of the picture, but the fact that there is, and I will post this, but for people listening, there is a picture of a person with a cold stunned sea turtle, and the person is in a coat and a hat and looks very cold and long pants. And you would just not expect that with a sea turtle on the beach. It is a really startling image of what those rescues look like.
Yeah, and so that's one of the staff at Wellfleet Bay. Back in, I think that's from 2012, if I remember correctly. It might be 2014. But yeah, I've gone out as a volunteer with the team and my kids, and yeah, you are snow pants, fully face covered, and it's freezing out there.
Yeah.
And the fact that these turtles are still alive. I grew up in Massachusetts, Central Mass, until I started volunteering here. Never did I ever think that there were these sea turtles. I knew about the leatherbacks, but these small animals that are, warm-blooded, why would they be here? And the fact that they are in a critically endangered turtle that's being born in Mexico and Texas, and the amount of numbers that they show up in here, it's amazing. So I came into rehab with seals and dolphins, didn't think about turtles, and then my first volunteer time with them just totally changed my vision, and it was Team Turtle all the way from there. But, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Turtles, sea turtles in particular, are why I fell in love with animals. The first time I went to the National Aquarium in Baltimore and saw one, it was like everything changed, and I was just obsessed from that point on. And they're amazing.
They are amazing, and like you stare into one of their eyes, and there's just something there. I mean, probably one of the reasons why there's so many lore and mythology about this planet we live on is on the back of a sea turtle. So they are definitely amazing animals.
Very cool.
But we'll walk up to the tanks.
Let's go see. So before you were able to pop out, I actually got to witness some of these goobs trying to eat and then successfully eating crabs.
Yep.
That was very exciting.
So once we get into the summer months and the turtles are getting to that point where they may be coming up for the ability to be released, because at the end of the day, every turtle that comes through this program, we want back in the ocean.
Right.
And so they eat crab out in the wild. We do catch green crabs, which are invasive species here. So we'll feed those there to see how they're doing. Otherwise their diet is herring and squid. Use that mostly for the caloric content to really kind of jumpstart, their building back up muscle and mass. Because when they're coming in, they're very amazing. So you see here our friend 143.
Hi.
Not really using that front right flipper.
Yeah,
he's had surgery on that.
Okay.
And so they went in and debrided the bones in there with an orthopedic surgeon.
Oh, wow.
So he's getting back to a point where, we do believe he'll be released this summer.
Wow.
So fingers, toes crossed. But ultimately should be able to be released at some point.
And that's actually something I was kind of curious about. I have heard through, friends in the industry and grapevine, so to speak, that it's becoming easier might be not the right word, but I'm going to float easier for now, and you can help me with this, to release turtles. That a lot of the turtles that would not be candidates for release maybe a decade or two ago, and that we see in a lot of aquariums now, would be back out in the ocean with the advances and the stuff that we've learned. Can you talk about that at all, or is that just a myth? Or
I don't know if it's easier. I mean, it's from all the work that everyone has been doing with sea turtles, I guess it might be better to say more turtles survive.
Okay.
To be able to be released.
Sure.
Than being released in general. Because every time an animal here would pass away, they do get a necropsy. We look at what's going on inside of the turtle. What could we have done different?
Right.
What should we do next time? So we're always building on those cases. We have a very good survivorship. You figure if programs like this didn't exist, all those turtles on Cape Cod Bay, that Strand, 100% mortality.
Right.
But our team here, we're looking at close to 78% survivorship.
Wow.
That comes through here.
That's amazing,
and that's
actually.
From entering the facility to when they head out.
Okay.
If they make it past the first 3 days, that really does pop up to your mid to high 90s.
Wow. Okay.
For survivorship for those animals. But yeah, I think it's more about the ability to have the turtle survive than.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Did you see the Colombian government is spending almost $4 million to relocate Pablo Escobar's hippos?
In Brazil, a school of piranha attacked and injured at least 8 people at a beach resort.
First fatal mountain lion attack in 20 years in California.
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You may have seen me on Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive or Shark Week. So join me and my friends as we break down animal news from around the world and discuss all things wildlife. Click here to unlock these animal mysteries.
Then maybe the ability to get them released.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Very cool. Yeah, every year more new things happen. New technologies, new procedures, new medicines.
Right.
That weren't there that would help these animals get back to the wild, are now becoming a little bit more commonplace.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me while we're here looking at these turtles? Can you talk to me about, they have numbers,
Yep.
but they have names, and
yes.
How does that work? How do you name them? All that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So right now we're looking at our tank of Tempsridleys here. So we got 5 in this tank right now. And so every year, so the numbers on them basically are numbers that are given to them by the folks down at Wellfleet Bay Wildlife.
Okay.
So they'll start numbering their turtles, I think around May, because that's about what time the turtles start coming back into Cape Cod Bay. So all those numbers, so this is 528, named Moonflower.
Hi, Moonflower.
And so 528 is the 528th turtle that team has found.
Not the most creative, but I'll take it.
Which is why we go to our names.
Yes.
So every year, staff come up with several options for a naming theme, and then we send that out to our volunteers and other staff to vote. And so then they vote on the naming theme. This year it was flowers. And so at that point, once we get to the turtles that are going to stay with us, we then, different teams or whoever was on that day gets to name the turtle.
Right. What does that provide? Why is that a step? And by the way, I love it. Yeah. It makes me happy. But I'd love to hear your take on just what effect that has on the staff and volunteers. I know the turtles probably don't learn their names.
No,
I'm assuming.
For all we know, they have their own name. But I think, for sure, it allows folks to kind of have more of a bond with the turtle. When I get to name a turtle every year. Sometimes I'll pass it up because I've been here for quite a while,
right.
And I've certainly named a lot of animals. But also, depending on what some of the names are, it will kind of provide a differentiation of which turtle is which. I mean, in this tank, they all kind of look pretty different, but that's because of the different medical complexities that's happening with each turtle. But when they're here in January and February, they all look the same.
Right, sure.
But sometimes there's just like little quirks or little marks on the turtles that may be like, oh, that's this turtle, and it's because of, it looks of the reason why the animal looks like this. I mean, so we had one turtle, bird of paradise. That's the one I named. But that was because of the color of the flower.
Okay.
Very much resembled the color of the shell.
Okay.
So
and
that
that's
was
the one
mine.
down here, right? I thought I saw that down here. Yeah. Okay.
He's developed a little bit of some issues with the carapace. That's now more in a healing state, but there was a little bit more reddish when the turtle was here.
Gotcha.
And then sometimes as they progress through the rehab, things will pop up that as they're eating, starting to heal, then allows them to kind of navigate through that.
Sure.
So this is our friend Artichoke.
Hi, Artichoke. Oh my gosh.
This turtle, it will be leaving us today.
Okay, so I'm gonna come see your release here, friend. Yeah, I'm gonna come see you do that in the ocean.
And so you can see for the loggerheads, it's kind of cool. We get turtles that are this size that, he's probably, he or she, we don't know at this age.
Right.
When they get older, their tail will extend from that shell, and that will tell us it's a male. But at this point, Artichoke, we're not sure. But this turtle is probably maybe 10-ish, whereas our friend over here, 336 or marshmallow, this turtle's probably mid to late teens, so you can see that size difference.
Yeah, it's a very big difference.
Yes. We don't typically see adults here, or even subadults in this region for the chelonids or the hard-shell turtles. The leatherbacks, it's the adults that we typically see.
Why is that, do you think?
Most likely for these turtles, we don't have nesting up here.
Right.
And really the closest nesting beach, on an annual basis, you're looking at Maryland, like the ST. There's been some, nests further north randomly, but so they're going to be staying down in those nesting areas.
That makes sense.
And they're kind of just passing through. It's more of just kind of a travel lane. Turtles will we have seen these juveniles come further north in search for food from some of the tagging that we've done. But that is why we're seeing the younger animals. It's as they're coming in and just kind of passing on. We have had repeat stranders, but you're looking at like 15, 16 animals we've now have had close to 5,000 live turtles come through the program. So it's a tiny percentage of restrands. Because as we expect, they should be heading south back to their nesting areas and their adult forage grounds. But it's hard with reptiles, especially with the sea turtles. They don't grow like mammals where they reach these certain milestones. If there's good forage, then they're going to grow faster than turtles that are in areas that there isn't.
Sure. That makes sense.
And then we have a green in here as well. I don't know if you've seen our friend here. So that is the third species that we work with out of the 5 that you typically see in the Atlantic Ocean.
It's kind of fascinating. I have been to a lot of aquariums and seen a lot of sea turtles. Yeah. But as you know, the sea turtles that are in aquariums are all injured to the point where they were non-releasable. And it's usually very visible. Yeah. There's usually all kinds of poor things going on with them. And they are beautiful and they are wonderful. But it is astonishing to me because, this green sea turtle is basically a pristine green sea turtle from what I can see. Obviously, you might know of other things. But, it's really shocking to see a perfect, just because they were cold stunned or whatever. And, I mean, it's really tugging on the heartstrings in a different way. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the turtles that come in, once we get to this stage, if you're here in October, November, December, you're going to see why we still have these guys here. But once we get to this stage, they are, for the most part, those turtles are, as we're getting close to being cleared for release, they look perfect. They look great. We do have some turtles that sometimes come in missing flippers, or there's a shell fracture, or some chips of that. So, it's a tough life out there in the ocean.
Yeah.
And by no means, do they all come in looking, like our little green friend here. But even when we get turtles that come in without a flipper that has lost something or a fracture, those, they heal up pretty good.
Right.
And there's plenty of 3-flipper turtles out there. So they're releasable as well.
That's cool.
Usually, when you think about non-releasable animals, these are all young turtles, and they will live for quite a long time. So before a veterinarian is going to declare they're non-releasable, it's got to be you also have to keep their well-being and their welfare in mind.
Right.
For the next 30 to 80 to 100 years.
Right.
Because if they're gonna live in constant pain, or if there's something that's not gonna really give them a quality of life wherever they go, then it could be that euthanasia is your preferred option.
Right.
Unfortunately, we really don't euthanize a lot of turtles. It happens. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but they come in. There's such severity of problems with turtles, and sometimes when we do the necropsy, because sometimes you can't see things on an X-ray or a CT, or you don't get the real big scope of what's happening, and then when you go in necropsy, you're like, yes, that was the right decision.
Right.
That this animal's was never going to get better.
Right. I say this a lot on the podcast, and it always kind of, it seems funny if you're not in this world, I think, but in this world, we're very pro-euthanasia on the podcast because it's done for a reason. And I forget what facility it was, but I recently saw a press release that instead of just saying a humane euthanasia, which I like, that's good, said a correct and humane euthanasia. And I was like, I like that because it is the correct choice in those moments. And I like the phrasing, you know?
In Latin, euthanasia is the good death. So, it's right there too. And any rehab program for any animal, that's always going to be one of those things that you'll have to make a decision on some animals. Sometimes it's very obvious why you would have to do it, and sometimes it's not. And we're always, for those animals we're not always sure with, we're going to throw everything at the turtle.
Right.
Because I've seen turtles come back from things that did not think they were going to survive, but they do. They're amazing. Just the mere fact that these turtles are coming in at 40 some odd degree Fahrenheit when they should be in waters that are mid 70s.
Yeah, that's
and
insane.
They're in that water for not just a couple hours, it's weeks.
Yeah.
And they survive and are then able to be released months later. It's just amazing. That would not be the case for most creatures on this earth. So
my son complains if it gets below 68. So, I do have a question for you while we're up here. So we've got what is the correct word for this? What do we call this?
You mean the tank?
Yeah. Okay.
Tank? Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Some people don't like that word. I think it's an appropriate word.
Tank or lane,
So, that's where I'm going with this. So we've got 2 tanks up here with camps.
Yep.
One of which has 5 camps, one of which has a whole lot more, but is divided into 4 lanes.
Correct.
But it's clearly sharing a system, like the water isn't stopped by the fencing that creates the lanes. So what is the philosophy or the thought process or whatever you want to call it in figuring out who goes where and how many can be in one spot, like just all of that stuff?
That's a great observation, great question. So a lot of times the division, so you'll also see on our other tanks, I'll point out that the loggerheads are by themselves.
Right.
They typically don't get along.
Okay.
We've had cases where 2 or 3 loggerheads might get along, and then we'll keep them together, but they usually get a little bit more territorial, and so they have to be separated.
Okay.
The camps and the greens, they, for the most part, will get along. Sometimes there's a little bit of food aggression, and we try to remedy that with how we feed. But the reason why we subdivide is also if you have, right in this tank, we have about 15 turtles. So when they go to feed these turtles, trying to keep track of 15 turtles eating the different various diets and the medications or the vitamins, it's very hard.
That makes sense.
So that's one part. But sometimes you do get aggressive turtles, and so we'll separate them from each other, or we get turtles that like to eat at the bottom of the tank. So if there's a turtle that eats the food out of the water column, or right as the food hits that and doesn't allow the food to float to the bottom,
right?
That turtle at the bottom is not going to get the feed. So a lot of it has to do with feeding behavior as well.
Interesting. Very cool.
And then we'll separate once we're, this time of year, sometimes for releases, we separate them because they might not be being fed the day before because they're going to be traveling down.
Right. Very cool.
And then we have our life support over here. We can see 4 different tanks, but we have 2 systems.
Right. Turtles are like gross. I imagine
gross.
that the life support must be pretty intense here.
I mean, fortunately, there's some parameters we don't have to worry about, like, our team on the other side that does work with the fish.
Right.
That they worry about because they breathe air. So there's some parameters we're not overly, that we don't worry about too much. But yeah, we have our sand filters, we have our protein skimmers, we have our bio towers, we have our regular, normal filter with the sock. Our ozone is critical for the cleanliness as far as bacterias. So this big piece of equipment right here is paramount, especially when you're dealing with larger animals that produce a lot of feces, a lot of urates, to keep that water nice and clean. And it's tested every single day. We have our various permit requirements for the water quality, and we always try to make sure that we're doing better than what we're being asked to do. But yeah, it's a huge piece. That's their home.
Right.
So we're vacuuming, we're getting, siphoning, we're skimming, we're making sure that the tanks are as clean as possible for the turtles when they're in here. And then you'll see in the tanks as well, there's various barrels and different things like that. So that's all enrichment.
Right.
So that way they're not just swimming around with the lights on them. They can kind of hide away and get out of that. The crabs are more of an enrichment piece than a dietary need.
That was fun to watch, by the way. That was real. Because I can't remember if I said this when we had mics on or not, so I'm just going to say it, and if so, I'll edit one of them out. But I've watched box turtles and stuff eat, and they're really bad at it. They will go after a strawberry and miss, and it'll roll a little bit and confound them for minutes, and then they will go after it again and miss. And this was a live crab moving like a crab does, and the sea turtle just grabbed it by the legs and kept following and took it down. I was actually impressed by that. It was interesting.
I mean, that's the thing. It's if they don't get to it, it's gone.
Right, yeah. I guess that must be life in the ocean.
So, yeah, they do. They still do here, but out there, it's either buried itself in the sand or it's under a rock somewhere.
Right, yeah.
So, for sure.
Now, out of curiosity, when you get the turtles in, I know that the goal is to release, so you need to live feed and stuff as you progress. But when they first get here, how do you feed them? Do you start off with dead animals and then move up, or how does that work?
And we're fortunate that there's young animals. So out in the wild, most of these turtles, they float along and they kind of eat things that pass by them out in the Sargasso. So they are young. They're not really as used to the moving live food that they have to capture. Okay. But we try to, a lot of the turtles will kind of start off with squid heads specifically because it looks more like a live thing in the water.
Okay.
But yeah, we try to get their attention with the food. Like I said, it's squid, it's herring. Sometimes we use clams, sometimes we use other things. We'll use shrimp sometimes, depending on what the turtle needs. But yeah, it's a delicate balance of trying to figure out, what that turtle is interested in eating. If they don't start eating, we'll give them enough time. But if the turtle starts to look thin and thin to a point that it's concerning for us, we'll tube feed. So we'll take the herring and the squid and kind of just grind it all up and add a little bit of water, almost a pudding consistency.
Yum.
Bones and skin. Oh yeah, it's delicious. I've never had it. But we'll tube feed those turtles.
Right.
And when we're doing that, usually there's medications that we might get that help stimulate appetite in other animals. But sometimes it's just a matter that they're still very sick, and they just, we all know how we feel when we're not doing well. Last thing we want to do is eat sometimes. Same thing with these turtles.
Okay, so. That makes sense. Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you want to head into your office? We'll just kind of keep chatting for a little bit. Is that cool? Or
let me just check in to see where we're at on tagging. So this is Dr. Ennis. He is with the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life.
Hello. Good. I'm John. Nice to meet you.
And so we're going to be putting acoustic tags externally on these turtles. So if you think of the external, the tag kind of as like an easy pass. So these are tags that if they pass a receiver out in the ocean, at some point we'll get that information back. 10, 15 years ago, there weren't as many arrays out there. And now there's a lot more, driven by, the wind work, sturgeon, a lot of sturgeon rehabbers. Years ago, they started implanting them into those animals to see where they're traveling. So we're kind of piggybacking on some of that technology. All the turtles, before they leave, will get a pit tag. So that's that little microchip that you would put in your cat or dog.
Okay.
But we don't know where the turtle goes. And the only time we'll know is if it comes back up on an SD beach or is found again and someone has a reader.
So are those the tags
those
there?
Are the 4 tags.
Can I wander over and look? I won't touch, but just take a gander. These look really cool.
Yeah.
They're kind of neat looking. So they just go right on the shell then?
Yep.
Okay.
And so we'll secure them on, and then...
What do you secure them with?
There's a kind of monofilament line, and then we'll apply some epoxy over that.
Okay.
And should give us anywhere between 3-7 years of information, whereas like the satellite tags, because of the battery life and that, we're lucky if we get more than a year.
Right.
Sometimes we do. But, these are young animals. There's still a lot of question about what do they do once they're put back into the ocean.
Right,
so this will give us a lot more time to figure that out.
That's really cool. I was just reading a story that Wolf Rehab for the first time has created solar tags that work like, so far they basically don't have a life limit from what they can tell. Now, I imagine that would be harder in the ocean because of ocean, but it is cool to see. I think it's cool to see just how technology keeps advancing.
So they have those tags for turtles as well.
Okay, cool.
Dr. Dodge is our telemetry expert.
Okay.
But what we have found in the turtles that are coming out of our program is they're not actually spending a lot of time in that kind of zone where the sun
makes sense.
But a big paper that came out about a decade ago, Cape Mansfield, really showed like these lost years where they did this with hatchlings because they kind of rest at the top with those solar tags. So they got a lot more information.
That's really interesting. Very cool.
It is really cool.
Very cool.
A lot of technology, a lot of advancements. Everything gets smaller and smaller, which is very helpful for smaller turtles. So.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. This is amazing. One of my favorite things, I'm always fascinated at the places that are set up for conservation, that aren't set up for like public and guests and stuff. And I mean, my whole podcast about zoos and aquariums. I love them. I love every aspect of good accredited facilities. But we're in a warehouse that just gets converted and just does this work. And it's incredible. And I remember like I was in Florida learning about grasshopper sparrow conservation. And the shed that we were in, I would not put in my backyard. It was fine. It was secure, but it was an older shed that they had, and that's what they were able. And the inside, just like the inside here, is incredible and state of the art and ready to go. But you're looking at this building, and you're like, dude's going to take me in there and murder me, isn't he? And instead, it's the hope of a species, which I find amazing. That is actually that, and also having learned about how zoos and aquariums transport animals and how a lot of times they'll do a handoff of like smaller mammals, especially at like a truck stop. If I ever see like 2 cars in the back of a parking lot in a truck stop, I used to wonder if something like shady was going on. Now I wonder if there's a red panda in there. Oh yeah, I'm sure. But the other 5%, it's a red panda. Yeah, I'm not going over regardless, but...
custom-made box coming out in the shape of a dog.
And we've been in that, when these turtles are ready to go, if it's spring and still cold up here, we'll drive down to North Carolina or Florida. And since we're passing by 5 different other organizations that are doing turtle they'll sometimes meet us on the road at 2 a.m. at a truck stop.
Some of there.
Yeah. And so it's this odd little thing that,
Harpoon turtles.
Yeah.
That's
you
just
never
amazing.
know. You never know what's happening
So
out
funny.
there. So you'll see, we have a good chunk of staff here today that are, but we also, we have volunteers coming through and interns. During the height of the season, you'll see a bunch of folks out there that are not paid staff. It's, the heart and soul of the program is these volunteers, whether it's a weekly volunteer or an intern here that's several days. We cannot do the work without them.
Okay, cool. Here, you can clip that back on, and we'll chat some more. I think we have a lot already, so we're good. I mean, but one of the questions that I had was, you mentioned that medicine keeps getting better and all of that stuff. And I'm curious, I know from experience, talking to other people and having a veterinary wife and stuff, that oftentimes there aren't medicines made specifically for these types of animals. They're made for whatever, and then we adapt. How much specific research and how much specific medicine is there for sea turtles versus how much is y'all adapting to more, standard like pet meds?
Yeah, I mean, so if there's a pet formulated medication, we'll typically use that. But most of the meds that we are using here are human medications.
Oh, okay, wow.
Which they use, in various forms, and whenever there's research on that, so like the pharmacokinetics, so like what's available, in the animal, because obviously humans are very different than sea turtles.
Yes.
So the dosing for us will be different for them. But we've done a lot of that research here. So there are, ceftazidime, fluconazole, trying to think, amikacin, we're doing some work. We definitely look at the other researchers that are out there. So, we have been kind of using what's kind of in the literature for like red-eared sliders or another reptile and trying to figure out the best way to use it here. But when we're able to, we then, as well as other organizations, do the research to figure out like what is the proper dosing. Right. But yeah, our frontline meds for the turtles, the oxytetracycline, which is used a lot in cattle. That's kind of a broad spectrum antibiotic, so hopefully hits everything that they'd be coming in with. But if the animals don't really start doing well within a few weeks, if we haven't taken blood or done a blood culture, then the veterinarians will order that, and then they get kind of the sensitivities which tell us you should be using an aminoglycoside or cephalosporin or whatever it is, and then we'll switch over to that, because just like in human medicine, you don't want to start off with certain pieces that we don't want to build resistance out there. So those more specialized medications we'll wait for that. Plus, some of the medicines out there are a little bit more harsh on animals that are debilitated, like the amikacin or gentamicin, can be harsh on kidneys. So we want to start off with something that's a little bit more broad, hopefully covers everything, because I describe it almost as an arms race when the turtles come in. So as they start to warm back up, all this bacteria and different things that are internally with that animal as well also are warming back up and getting to that optimal temperature.
Makes sense.
So that's why we'll start prophylactic antibiotics on all of the smaller turtles. They get the fluid therapies. There's, again, we kind of talked about the numbers. If there's a lot of animals, it's kind of a generalized treatment plan for most of them. And then if their turtles aren't doing well, they'll go in, get blood work. The veterinarians then look at all of that and the radiographs, and we'll determine a more specialized plan for some of them.
Very cool. All right. How did you get to where you are? Because you said you started off like volunteering here. What is your journey?
Yeah, it's a crazy one. For sure, when I was young, I wanted to work with dolphins, I got seasick. Really, I got lake sick. It was Lake Ontario that did it to me. And so I kind of shifted away from that. I got into computers and did some programming, and I was working in pharmacy as a tech. And, and I just wanted something different. So I'm kind of more late in life coming to this. I did not follow your traditional path of like, doing, this is what I wanted to do. Didn't really know that there were volunteer programs out there. There were no podcasts because the computers weren't there in the way we know them today. And so just, was told like, oh, you should volunteer, do something like that. And so I found the aquarium, came in, filled the application out by hand. There was no submit button. And reading the descriptions, the rescue and rehab was kind of the one that sounded the coolest. Again, wanting to work with the seals and dolphins and sea turtles, that's cool, And so I started volunteering in 2002. And that was one of, it was like, I believe it was the second largest turtle stranding year. I think it was, if I remember correctly, a whopping 93 turtles. I just fell in love with them. Just like the fact that these turtles are coming in, they look like they're dead, or for most, and back then we used little fetal heart monitors and we would sit there and wait half an hour to see if we hear a heartbeat if the turtle's not moving. We did not have the ultrasounds, or we had one, but that wasn't very good. Certainly helpful at some point, but, and just sitting with these turtles, trying to listen for a heartbeat and just kind of being with them, just, it sold me on them,
right.
Just, shifted gears, like, these are awesome. And then went back to school for a biology degree. Kind of hung around. It's a hot day today. I'm sweating. It's not that hot, but and so I basically canceled out the South for turtles. I just
it's not my
weather.
That's fair.
Not my job.
That's fair.
So I stayed up here. Just kind of hung around. Was working full time elsewhere and volunteering and doing some seasonal work. During the big intake season, we do get funding from NOAA to hire on a couple of seasonal biologists to help out with it. And so I did that for many years, and then was hired in 2008, I think, full time, and just kind of stayed and progressed and moved on. And here I am now. I did not think I would ever get into this role, but yeah, no, in 2021, I got the director position, and here I am today. And yeah, no, it's phenomenal. Again, it was a crazy ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. All the way from volunteer to director.
Yes.
I like it. I like it a lot.
And if you have a lot of the folks here that are staff, majority have volunteered in one way or another. And it's like I said, the volunteers are certainly kind of the lifeblood that really makes sure that we can do what we can do and what we want to do, and all the different work that happens.
I believe it. If anybody listening wanted to contribute or help out, with everything going on here, what's the best way for them to do that?
There is a Get Involved on the neaq.org website. There you can kind of look at opportunities. There's the general programming donation work that's on the aquarium site as well. If you go to our website specifically for the rescue team, there are spots that you can donate there that can help fund the work here. There's minimal federal funding for the turtles. Other than that money we get to hire on a couple folks for about 3 months. The majority of the funding that comes in here is typically from folks that are walking through the doors up in Boston. We certainly get a lot of good donations from foundations and individuals as well that are able to support that. So that's wonderful too. But yeah, the majority of the funding for this program does come from folks coming to visit the aquarium.
Wow. Well, then that leads to an interesting question. And I hope this is serious, because it might almost sound a little goofy, but I'm being dead serious. How much does Myrtle help you guys? Because she's super popular, and because she is a turtle that you were going to see at that aquarium, how much of a direct impact do you think Myrtle has on the life of these turtles out here?
I mean, she is a huge ambassador for all sea turtles. I mean, you hear people that come from all around the country, and sometimes you see posts around the world that like, I love Myrtle. Like she is a huge draw, and everyone remembers Myrtle when they walk through and have come and visited. So yeah, she is certainly like the ambassador for these animals that are out here, and definitely helps them in ways that, again, the funding that comes through people coming up into that building, and she is probably one of the major draws bringing people in, or at least they come in, they visit her, and they want to come back and see her again. Mm-hmm. She's an amazing animal. She's fabulous. I always love to, when you saw the green turtle we had out there, I'm always like, this turtle, that was Myrtle.
Yep.
Maybe 80, maybe 100 years.
So crazy to think about.
We don't know 100% how old she is. That this little turtle right here is going to become this very large animal, 30, 40 years down the road.
So cool to think about. It really is. Oh, I love that. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
There's a lot of poop. I do a lot of necropsies over the years. So, unfortunately, probably the most disgusting story I have is with a dead whale, and just kind of, getting in there and like being hip deep in a whale with the inside of the animal all around, and quite a smell, for sure. And, it was a hot day. So,
of course it was.
Yes. I feel most of my gross stories typically are more mammal related than the sea turtles.
Well, that's acceptable.
Because, my feelings for them. But it was cool, but really gross, and just, blood kind of everywhere. I lost a uniform that day because of, I had we wear the Grundens and we get ourselves all in, but somehow a button came unsnapped, and as I'm taking everything off, my pants were just so everything. So,
man.
I don't know if you've ever been at a whale necropsy or been around blubber, but that is a smell you just never get out.
I believe it. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Standing in a dead whale is a good one.
Sad, because they're magnificent animals, but such an important piece, and so much information is gleaned from those necropsies.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, very cool. Awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that we can throw in? But I think we're more than good. We got a lot.
Yeah, we got a ton. I always like to tell folks, check twice for turtles, especially in Cape Cod Bay in the summer. We are starting to see some more turtles come in with nicks and, likely boat interactions. Not 100% sure, right. But, if you're in that area or really along the East Coast, these turtles are coming up, taking breaths and coming down, and, leatherbacks, when they're feeding, sometimes they're about a foot under what they're eating where the jellies are. So you might not see them, but really just check twice.
Makes sense. Very good. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, such a fun chat. And make sure that you're following along on the socials at Rossifari, because I will be posting pictures and maybe even some videos of the hospital, and also of what came next. Because after that incredible interview, I hopped in my car and went to an amazing coffee shop. Got to get that in there, of course. And then headed off to the beach, where I actually got to witness 5 of the sea turtles that I saw in that hospital get released. It was astonishing. I sobbed. I absolutely sobbed. There's video of it. It's hard to hear because of the ocean being loud, but it was one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen in my entire life. And I wish I could even explain how much it meant to me, to you all. But I don't have the words. I've been thinking about this since it happened. And I highly recommend going and seeing a sea turtle release if the opportunity presents itself. What these people do and what the team at the Sea Turtle Hospital at New England Aquarium is doing is absolutely incredible. And it's just such a beautiful thing, y'all. It really is. I think back on it now, and I'm just as speechless as I was then. I'm so grateful to have had this moment in my life and to be able to share it with y'all. So, that's all I'm going to say about that, other than that if you happen to be on the Cape Cod area at some point in your life, Wednesdays is often when cold stunned sea turtles get released. So try to find out if one's happening because, wow, it was amazing. It was so cool. So, I'm eternally grateful to the team at New England Aquarium for letting me be a part of all of this, and also for the next 2 weeks worth of episodes that you're going to hear all kinds of cool stuff. So don't forget to make sure you're subscribed and that you're back here on Tuesday for those and on Fridays for Zoo News and all that good stuff. And don't forget that you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. I'd like to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. And last but not least, don't forget, y'all, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.